downtown, walking fast, faces pass and I'm homebound. Staring blankly ahead, just making my way through the crowd. And I need you, and I miss you, and now I wonder if I could fall into the sky. Do you think time would pass me by? 'Cause you know I'd walk 1,000 miles if I could just see you tonight.
Welcome magic and wonder, brilliance and grace. Welcome joy, satisfaction, pleasure and strain. Welcome essence, beauty, presence, time, spirit, form and space. Welcome excellence in every blessing, sacred and praise. What I seek, I have. What I wanna know, I understand. All I wish I could, I can. Who I wanna be, I am. What I seek, I have. What I wanna know, I understand. All I wish I could, I can. Who I wanna be, I am.
Mana is my mountain, and Aloha is my sea. Fano is my rocker, and all of that is me. Aha, kwa mama. Keiko Nekwe, though you are far away, I hold you near.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us today to acknowledge International Day of the World's Indigenous Peoples. So on behalf of the panel, we pay our respects to all Indigenous peoples across the globe. We recognise the tenacity and strength of our families and our communities, and we are filled with pride in the way in which Indigenous people continue to find the strength to care for each other and our homelands, even though we are constantly under the threat of settler colonial violence. We respect and honour our respective ancestors and the elders who continue to guide us. We'd also like to acknowledge all the Indigenous peoples who have joined us here today. I just want us to remember that even in this digital space, we owe a debt to Indigenous peoples whose homelands are used to support the infrastructure needed for us to be online. So today's webinar is supported by the Australian Research Council Centre of Excellence for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, or what we call CEVAW. So I'm one of the deputy directors in CEVAW. I'm Professor Bronwyn Carlson, and I'm also the chief investigator along with Professor Kylie Cripps from Monash University for the dedicated Indigenous pillar that we have in CEVAW. So the Indigenous pillar engages with research that really centres our communities, and we're really fortunate to be able to work alongside a number of associate investigators and partner organisations to find Indigenous-led solutions to family violence. This year's official theme for International Day of the World's Indigenous Peoples is about protecting Indigenous rights in terms of voluntary isolation and first contact. For many of us, however, that ship has sailed, so they say. Indigenous people comprise at less than 6% of the globe's population, yet we represent the most marginalised people in the world. Today, instead of focusing on family violence or the violence we experience every day, we thought we'd like to think about what brings us joy. This can be the work that we do in our communities or all the other ways in which we find joy in the world. It's not often that Indigenous people are given the space to think about joy. Even in joyous moments, we are reminded of the violence we experience as colonized peoples. And some of you might remember that young fella who won that $1 million in the fishing competition just recently. The media and the public immediately turned on him to paint him as undeserving. This is an experience that many of us have when we are deemed successful or in the public eye. But joy is important. It doesn't counter the violence Indigenous people experience in the world. It does, however, demonstrate our resistance and our resilience. We are constantly subjected to deficit discourse and real and present dangers. But we are also a collective that draws strength from each other, as this panel is a perfect example of. Joy is laughter that happens when we are together. Joy is that perfect cup of tea that a young person makes you, even if you have to growl them once or twice to get it right. Joy is the fun we have at laughing at the colonizers. Joy is the good gossip session. Joy is the graduations we attend of our young people who are the future. Joy is our language reclamation. Joy is seeing other Indigenous people thrive. Joy is being Indigenous. Today we have 5 wonderful presenters for this webinar, and I'm really excited to hear from each of them. Each presenter will speak for about 10 minutes, and then we'll have 20 minutes for some questions. The Q&A function is operating, and we'll be sharing resources in the chat. Lots of work goes in behind the scenes for events like this so that they happen. And so I would like to thank Professor Sarah Davies and Angela McDonald from the Griffith Node of CEVAW for all their support and for sharing the resources in the chat and monitoring the Q&A. I'd also like to thank Noelle Steele-Alston from the Monash Node of CEVAW, who is making sure all the tech works. And I would especially like to thank Lotus Rana, my colleague, who is the Research and Ethics Training Program Coordinator at Macquarie University Node, who has invited all our wonderful guests, has provided us with all the information we need for the day, and has put together the slides and organized the beautiful music we were all treated to prior to the webinar starting. So let's get started. This is very exciting, and I'm really looking forward to this. So our first speaker is Professor Selena Tusitala Marsh, also known as Mophead. Selena is a Pacifica Poet Scholar and an academic at the University of Auckland's English and Drama Department and co-director of the Centre of Arts and Social Transformation. Her latest book, What Not You Got, Mophead's Guide to Life, is long listed for this year's Children's and Young Adults Book Awards. And I had the absolute pleasure of presenting alongside Selena just recently and got to meet her and witnessed her absolute brilliance on stage as the entire audience of about 1,200 people were captivated by her fabulousness. Thank you, Selena.
Thank you, Bronwyn. Malole soifua mawa malelangi e mama. Olo oingo Selena Tusitala Marsh. Tusitala is the Samoan Tuvaluan word for teller of tales or storyteller, and it's my Tuvaluan grandfather's name. And it's a name I've been born into, and it's a legacy I continue to grow. Whawhitai tele lava to the CEVAW crew. Thank you so much to Bronwyn for our connection. Thank you to the Centre for Global Indigenous Futures, based on the stolen lands of the Walumatagal clan of the Darug-speaking peoples. I acknowledge the Walumatagal elders, past, present, and future. I acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, always was, always will be. I acknowledge all the bloodlines and landlines here today, for we are led by line, bloodline, love line, land line. The stitched line is a fine line when out of line with the colonial line. We are led by line, horizon line, body line, fault line, fisher line is out of line with the imperial line, the buried head in the sand line. We are led by line, lining up our spoken lines, broken lines of disintegrating harmonies. When we realign, laying it on the line by drawing our line in the sand. And joy is knowing who you are and why you are. Joy is being accountable to your people and at the same time being accountable to no one except yourself and your gods. Joy is finding your voice, your way in the belly of the beast. Joy is writing a poem in response to outdated, racist research picked up by the media and once again stereotyping your people. And by your people, I mean any brown people otherwise known in Aotearoa, New Zealand as Pacific Islanders or PIs. And that includes Māori because they're brown too, and sometimes it's just too complicated to tell the difference. When your people, PIs, are once again stereotyped as dole bludgers, criminals, and, quote, an economic drain on this country's resources, unquote, as headlined in a national newspaper in 2008, because they fail in schools more and earlier, because they get sick more and earlier, commit crimes more and earlier, get jailed more and earlier. Joy is speaking your truth, embracing it all like any other people. We have it all. Joy is chanting, singing, and praying a counter narrative back to them. Then chanting, singing, and praying a song back to ourselves. I'm a fast-talking PI. I'm a power-walking PI. I'm a demographic, hieroglyphic, fact sheet welding PI. I'm a theorizing PI. I'm a strategizing PI. I'm published in a peer-reviewed journal PI. I'm a slot machine PI. I'm a lotto queen PI. I'm a tote ticket church bingo TAB PI. I'm a vegan PI, a rainbow warrior PI. I'm a protest sign against the rising waters PI. I'm a criminal PI, behind the bar graphs PI. I'm a gun smoking, patch toting king cobra PI. I'm a fale PI, a marae PI. I'm a living, breathing dwelling of my ancestors PI. I'm a lazy PI. I'm a pea crazy PI. I'm a hard drinking, hard speaking, wear my eggs PI. I'm a land based PI, a whanua PI. I'm a village is the center of my world PI. I'm a harvesting PI, a copper sacking PI. I'm a biting beef cause no more fish in reef PI. I'm a diabetic PI. I'm a heart disease PI. I'm a gout inflated, incubated case study PI. I'm a CEVAW PI. I'm an Ava pouring PI. I'm a Tula Fale tonguing genealogy PI. I'm an independent PI, a flag raising PI. I'm a fa'a loving, giving, living PI. I'm a property PI, a self-employed PI. I'm a mocha drinking, hornroom glassing, real TV PI. I'm a crumpin PI, a go for God PI. I'm a colour-free gangster wannabe for the Lord PI. I'm a BA PI. I'm an MA PI. I'm a PhD, BCom, LLB, MD PI. I'm a bi PI. I'm a gay PI. I'm a cross-gendered, soul-blended, masquerade PI. I'm an angry PI. I'm a dawn-raided PI. I'm a crouching Polly Panther in Grey Lynn PI. I'm a quiet PI. I'm a small PI. I'm a take no lunch to school today, but anyway PI. I'm a bit of both PI. A chameleon PI. A hybrid mongrel self-satisfied PI. And that chant continues for another 10 minutes. And joy is when your chant, your poem called Fast Talking PI goes viral, becomes the title of your first poetry collection, and wins a National Book Award. Joy is reaching everybody by simply being yourself. And a line often attributed to Maya Angelou goes, "A bird doesn't sing because it has the answer. A bird sings because it has a song. And I've taped this to my office door at the University of Auckland English department because I want students to know that they're here for more of who they were born to be, more of what, why, and how that sets them free. But I can't do that if I don't live that. And being a Pacifica poet scholar in what was traditionally a colonial stronghold, the English department, has not been easy. And poetry has and always will be a lifeline for me, professionally and personally. And I want to share with you a few of my poetic joy anchors. Mary Oliver's poem, Wild Geese, opens, "You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert, repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves." And that's where joy lies. When I wanted to tell my story of becoming the first Pacific Island New Zealand Poet Laureate, the one with the biggest hair, I wanted to bust open the elite literary castles that the laureateship existed in and was transferred between. And I wanted our kids to know that this country valued its poets and that being a poet was an actual thing. So I decided to write and draw a graphic memoir about the story of how I went from being teased at school as a mophead to becoming the proud kaitiaki caretaker of the poet laureate Toko Toko, the walking, talking stick that looked like a mop. A colleague told me I was, quote, committing academic suicide, that I should focus on writing peer-reviewed articles and getting my scholarly book out if I ever wanted to get promoted. I published Mophead. It won the Supreme Children's Book Award. I published 2 more Mophead books. And 2 years ago, I was promoted to full professor, the first internally promoted professor of Pacific descent at the University of Auckland, the world's largest Polynesian city. My colleague retired as a senior lecturer. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. So how do you do this? 13th century Persian poet Rumi offers this. The breeze at dawn has secrets to tell you. Do not go back to sleep. You must ask for what you really want. Do not go back to sleep. The door is round and open where the 2 worlds meet. The breeze at dawn has secrets to tell you. Do not go back to sleep. These lines I follow. They take me back to bloodlines. That's my alarm. But I set it 2 minutes early. Let me just, excuse me. How do I turn it off? Okay. These lines I follow and they take me back to bloodlines, my landlines, and my love lines. I'll leave you with Alice Walker's lines that I continue to live by and that are the source of my joy. Be nobody's outcast. Be nobody's darling. Be an outcast. Take the contradictions of your life and wrap around you as a shawl to parry the stones, to keep you warm. And I'll finish off with Indi Ari's words in the chorus. What I seek, I am. What I want to know, I understand. All I ever could, I can. All I want to be, I am. And just to let you know that I wrote this presentation with the help of AI, ancestral intelligence. Kia ora, whawhetai tele lava. Lovely to be in this place with you. Thank you.
Wow, Selena. Every time I hear you speak, I'm just mesmerized and I'm just right there with you, loving on everything. I'm not a poet, but wow, that's just so beautiful. Um,
Bronwyn, I bet you are. I bet
well,
you are.
but not like that.
Come spend some time with me. We'll
Oh
do
my
it.
goodness, I would just love that. You are PI awesome, as well. Need to add to that list. Thank you so much, Selena. That's just beautiful. So moving to our next speaker, who is a fabulous person who's part of our CEVAW crew, Alamita Lekanawa, who is an Indigenous Fijian. Alamita is a CEVAW PhD candidate undertaking her doctoral studies at the Melbourne Law School and through the Melbourne node of CEVAW. Alamita's research seeks to explore pathways to justice for professional women as victim survivors of domestic violence in Fiji. And prior to her doctoral studies, Alamita worked for almost 2 decades with various Indigenous communities in the Pacific, including Fiji and Nauru, practicing as a barrister, solicitor, and gender consultant. Wow, we have such an amazing lineup. And Alamita, thank you for joining us as well, and take it away.
Thank you. Luvinaka, I would like to first pay my respect and acknowledge the traditional owners of the land of where I'm joining from. Joining from Melbourne University, and I thank you for this opportunity. Bulusia, I'm de babna inalo na ngono sei, babna ba lebu na programo may by avioina, o urang ina urang adom lebu, may madwa ana aweni bulat angane, maambure kaka, ba urang wasabulu, ban urang ulambasa, ba urang uban uranga uwelebu. Thank you. And Mbuluvinak, to everyone who is joining us in this webinar. I am so excited to be part of this panel. And as Professor Selena has mentioned about the lines, today I will be continuing with that lines, but I'm putting signposts of where that line is traveling and taking us today. So talking about Indigenous joy, I would like to first open, first of all, in terms of what Fijian knowledge and culture and history and the wisdom of the land for us. So I'm quoting from the recent publication that was issued in 2013, if you can see on my photographs there, the book Vukunivanua, Wisdom of the Land, Fijian, the collection of knowledge of our people, our collection of wisdom is defined group of people, is encompassing the customs and tradition of our people. This is inclusive of ways of life, Indigenous knowledge, epistemology, philosophy. Indigenous Fijian knowledges and worldviews have historically given our people meaning to their life. And such knowledge, of course, have evolved, is dynamic, ever-changing and alive, and is lived by our people in change. Indigenous knowledge and epistemology of a people are captured in the landscape, rivers, mountains, valleys, and tribal lands, their role, and in their languages, as well as silences. So thank you. Just to open that quote in terms of just putting out what Fijian knowledges and worldviews and wisdom and cultures are about. Now, the first acronyms, since we are celebrating Indigenous joy and in the world of research and in our experiences, I would like to first start with the word J, the acronyms of the word joy. So I'll start with J. So for me, J stands for joint or intersect, the joint meaning the engagement, which forms a structure of what you're working on. So in my line of experiences, excuse me, as an Indigenous researcher, I find that the role intersects with two worlds, and that is indigeneity and modernity. So as Professor Selena has mentioned, the lines, they do travel and they do cross at most times. And the transmission of knowledge also intersects in this area, and they form the basis of knowledge that better serves our communities. Transmission of knowledge, as the line is still traveling, it comes through in the form of social interactions, of dialogue, conversation, oral traditions, songs, dance, and art. As I reflect on this acronym of what joy and intersection is happening in the world of Indigenous research, and it's a joy as a researcher, you become a channel or a conduit that allows for that seamless flowing of knowledge to travel from the traditional owners through to you and to others. And it's beautiful. The line is traveling. Excuse me. I also would like to acknowledge the work that has been done in the Fijian research and in this landscape through the decolonizing of research, Professor Unai Simbamba's work, the Fijian research framework. So there's been development and changing of landscape in this area of research. As you can see from the photo up at the top, the beach here, this is from the Pacific Harbor, Coral Coast. It speaks about worldviews and how we look at our space. It encompasses of beauty, of joy, of just enjoying what the landscape gives us. And the second word is ownership, ours. As we all aware, traditional knowledge is owned by the members and it's captured in the environment where indigenous communities are situated. So these are through geographical landscape, physical, spiritual, myth, legends, art, songs, artifacts, medicinal, oral traditions. So again, the knowledge is gathered. And as a researcher, it is important that we take responsibility of this knowledge. And not only that, it's acquired for the purpose of betterment and improvement of lives. So again, one thing that I would like to stress here in terms of it is our role to listen carefully and understand the deep meaning of what is being said, getting the story right and transmitting the meaning accurately are equally important. And this is, as you can see in the photos, on the side where I'm sitting and I'm sharing, that is where I was speaking to the villagers, speaking about what they are sharing and also listening to what they are sharing about what is being researched on. And my last point is why, yours or yonder, from here to where. And to close this acronym journey, I would like to say that based on the book that is on the slide, it is the prayer that the research into Indigenous Fijian society and aspect of this culture and tradition continue to be strengthened. And as a researcher, it is a responsibility that we continue to get this line flowing, get this meaning going, and get this our tradition and our heritage continuing on. And working with communities, Indigenous communities, for me personally, I have fond memories and experiences with Indigenous community. You learn, you still have more to learn, even going into these communities, there's still so much to learn. And we formed long-standing relationship and connections with communities. And also one last point to leave with us, what you experience and observe as you immerse yourself in conducting the research in the Indigenous community is an experience that is unique only to you as a researcher. Treasure it. And to finish off, I would like to just, you can see on my last two photos down there, you see the fishing boats and I'm sitting there. This is from my hometown in Lambasa. This is my favorite place of hanging at the fish market. So this is where the fishermen all over the islands coming into the channel, the river, and this is where we meet. And this is where the information, the stories, the laughters, the joy, they are happening here. And I'm reminded of one short story which I learned in my high school days. I remember about this boy that went to school, came back with his degree, and then he was told by his parents, well, come fishing with me, you still have a lot to learn. So those photos, I took that symbolically for that purpose, that there is still more to learn. And I'm sitting there in the hub of that learning, in the hub of where the knowledge are intersecting right at my hometown. And that's me in the village with my nephew, doing what I love, and that is researching and learning more about my communities. And those women at the top, those were senior gatekeepers of senior Indigenous citizen, which we encountered and also engaged with, and they were considered as gatekeepers of the communities. So, and I thank you for this opportunity to share my my joy as an Indigenous researcher. And yes, thank you very much. And I pass it on back to you, Professor Brown. Thank you.
Thank you, Alamita. That's just beautiful. I just love how you remind us that, there's always so much to learn from our communities. And I just love how you have shown us all the beautiful places from your homelands and connected that with the lines that Selena was talking about. Yeah, and the absolute joy of being on country and learning from the people in which we love to work with. So thank you very much, Alamita. Next up, we have Tatay Bakich, who is both the department coordinator and a master's student in the Department of Critical Indigenous Studies at Wallamata campus, Macquarie University. Tatay is also my colleague, is a wonderful member of our team at Macquarie, is growing up very well to be the big bossy person in the department. And we absolutely adore Tatay. Their research focus includes Indigenous perspectives of skin marking practices across Papua New Guinea and more broadly the Pacific. Very much looking forward to hearing Tatay speak to the topic of joy, and these slides look wonderful. Up to you, Tatay.
Thank you, distinguished Prof. Carson and Lotus and the rest of the CEVAW team for having me. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm zooming in from Dharawal country, which is southwest of Darug, where I work/study in the department on Wallamata campus. I pay my respects to Dharawal peoples, land and waterways, and acknowledge that our Indigenous communities have intertwined histories, relationships, and shared joy that predates colonial contact on Aboriginal land. So with this in mind, I wanted to start with the people who I share joy with on Darug, my colleagues, my team, my co-conspirators in burning the colony down, and my who do you want to be when you grow up? Spoiler, it's them, all of them. In my experience, 10% of the academy wears me down, but the other 90% makes it worth it. It's being in the last semester of your undergraduate and the department administrator, Maddie, offering you a cadetship to work 1 day a week in the department as a research assistant. When you graduate, you're offered that very position and as Maddie moves into a full-time lecturer position, it is working under the leadership and guidance of award-winning ARC overachiever, cut you down where you stand with the quickest comebacks, country music extraordinaire, head of department, distinguished Prof. Bronwyn Carson. It is working in a team where you see all facets of yourself represented, being an Indigenous woman, being queer, scheming how to put the resources you access in the academy straight back into your community for your benefit, for our benefit. It is your fellow lactose-free, powered by caffeine and blended chai bandits and not safe for work humor. Let's go have a Doris, and why don't we dedicate a wall to putting up pictures of everyone's pets in the office? It's I'll only come on your early morning walk in the botanical gardens if we can take a TikTok, Arnie. It is the list of one-liners that make you guts or laugh out loud at the Mudmere table. It is having the opportunity to experience your first Mardi Gras in a meta corporate box with your team, and then the very next year walking in the parade on Oxford Street, wearing the Torres Strait Islander flag. It is feeling like it's finally okay to be queer because you're surrounded by queer mob who are nice to you. It is your partner doing your makeup for the parade and knowing everything will be okay and you won't fall down on national television because they're waiting at the end if you do. It is having a partner who understands you and is patient, that takes the time to teach you their cultural customs, their family norms, and how to pronounce words, most importantly names, properly in their language. It is dating someone who is also a Pacific person, and so you get to share recipes with each other and try new dishes. It is celebrating achievements like master's and PhD completions. It is unintentionally giving a full professor in your department your copy of Akatar in the Black Myth Secret Santa White Elephant. It is being offered the opportunity to travel domestically and internationally, and you find yourself suddenly sitting in a room surrounded by Pacific scholars who are at all stages of academia, and you big cry as you tell them about your master's project. The same one you're going to submit in 3 years. It is the auntie growl that reminds you to keep going. It is your graduation with your family when you know all that they sacrificed in order to make sure you could thrive on the mainland. It is bringing family into the institution in your cultural dress for a book launch where you co-wrote a chapter about their activism. It is bringing friends who have a tough time at their own uni to your uni so they know we exist in the academy and we support each other. It is meeting your best friend at the university and her driving half an hour into the city in peak COVID with a hand-painted sign saying, "Love you, Bob, feel better," when you're day 4 into your first time having COVID and you don't know what day it is and the last time you ate and when you slept. It is the cabin fever coming on. It is your boss texting you every day to check in and make sure you're not losing your mind, being alone and being sick. It is that same friend who made the sign taking you real camping for the first time with a swag, no tent, and you're sharing a two-person swag and you wake up and it's pitch black and you have a panic attack because you're claustrophobic and they don't hear you screaming their name because they have noise cancelling headphones in, but eventually they do hear you. And so you unzip the swag enough for you so you can keep your hand outside the swag for the rest of the night, even though it's raining and water gets into the swag. It is seeing your siblings grow up and talk about, when I go to uni like Tay. It is demystifying uni for them and showing them that you can see the world and be yourself and that you are smart enough for uni. Oh, I lost my place. And that you belong here because countless Indigenous academics have paved a way for you to be here and that there is room for all of us. It is growing up in a multi-generational home where you make a pact to go skydiving together when you turn 18 because your mum turns 40 and your grandma turns 60. It is growing up sharing a bed with your grandma on family holidays because you know both of you are least likely to get annoyed with each other and pick a fight. It is getting your family marks, your Reva, and hearing stories about how your great-grandmother marked your grandmother with the same Reva you both wear on your arms. So I guess my take-home message from that brain dump is that for me, Indigenous joy is community. It is being in, the being part of, the being forged from, and the being cared for. Thank you for listening.
You always continue to inspire me today in all of the work that you do. I'm just always in awe of your presentations. And I just thank you being part of this department with us, but for sharing your family with us. I feel like I know all of them, to get to sit with your granddad and other members of your family who come on campus and spend time with us. I just love it. Yeah, all of your joy you bring us in the department. Yeah, that's just not even measurable. One of my favorite things that Tate has gifted us with is, of course, the Mudmere table, which is our big table in the center of our department. And loosely speaking, it means to gossip. And we sit there and gossip together and conspire and plot and plan. And it's a fabulous space to be in. Thank you, Tate. Our next presenter is Dr. Pauline Reynolds, who is an adjunct fellow in the Department of Critical Indigenous Studies at Macquarie University. She is a Norfolk Islander of Pitcairn, Tahitian, and Huahine and European descent, a Pacific scholar and tapper maker. She's best known for her work with museum collections and curatorial teams around the world, and for making replications of Tahitian and Pitcairn bark cloth clothing from the 1700s and 1800s. And for me, Pauline has been a fabulous mentor to Lotus and to our department. And I'm so joyful that Pauline is now an adjunct, a member of our department. Just the knowledge, the absolute collaboration that Pauline brings is fantastic. Recently, some of our crew went off to Norfolk Island, and Pauline embraced all of our members as family, and for that I'm very grateful. So big love to you, Pauline. Take it away.
Hey, what away all Yoli. Thank you so much, Bronwyn. So my name is Pauline Reynolds. My come from is Norfolk Island, Hiti Aureva, Tahiti, Huahine, and got a bit of English sullen in there too. I'd like to thank and acknowledge everyone who's worked so hard to put this incredible, joyful webinar together, and the wisdom of the speakers, as well as you, the audience, for joining us. Excuse me. So relationships bring me joy. This joy comes to me from the side of me that is Indigenous to the Pacific, from all the islands I'm connected to. An Indigenous world is a relational world. I often find as a Pacific person, but also as a historian interested in the past and the worlds those before me lived in, that a relational world is everything. Relationships to people who are living, my family, my friends, my colleagues, relationships to people no longer living, my tupuna, my baby sister, relationships to toa, toa being objects and treasures, relationships to those who look after toa in museums. Of course, as a mother, daughter, sister, cousin, friend, my world could be perceived as being small and crowded, but as a Pacific Islander, my world is vast through all of these relationships. But my world is also, as I get older, more concentrated, more thoughtful. It has more boundaries, and those boundaries are there to ensure that I experience joy every day in my life. So the intersection between creative practice and research in my life to honour my ancestors brings me immense joy. The photos that you can see highlight a number of joyful relationships that I have. So the first photo on the left is myself and my daughter, Moatua. She's named after our ancestor, 8 generations before me, one of the incredible women from Tahiti who established our community, our people, on Hitiaorewerewha, Pitcairn Island, along with another 11 Polynesian women, 6 Polynesian men, and 9 British mutineers from the ship Bounty in the 1700s. In that photo, you can see Moatua touching the hair of an ancestor of ours. The hair was originally sent in a letter in the 1850s to a ship's captain. Moatua is touching the hair of an ancestor who lived 170 years ago, and that hair contains the mana, the essence of its owner. And we can travel back and forward through time looking at this photo, my youngest child, back through time to the 1850s, and before through the web of genealogy that connects all Pacific people. This movement through time via the portals of treasures, tau'a, objects, all happened in the Anthropological Library in the British Museum in London. The photo was taken by my friend Dr. Lucy Caro from the MAA in Cambridge during the Pacific Presences project. Such is the power of the web of relationships recorded in this photo, tangible and intangible. This was all part of my research trying to understand the world of my ancestors from Tahiti and Huahine and their movement to Hitiaorewerewha, Pitcairn Island in the 1790s, and understanding their children and grandchildren. There's an immense joy that comes from connecting with ancestral treasures and the relationships this creates. The second photo on the right is me at the British Museum stores in London a few years ago. My research took me to the UK to search for the many tapa cloths made by my ancestresses on Tahiti and Pitcairn. These were gifted to ship's captains who usually brought them home with them to England, Scotland, America, and so on. In the photo, I'm holding, and I'm quite emotional in that photo, 2 tools used for making tapa cloth, which we call e. Hitiaorewerewha, Pitcairn was the only island in Polynesia that used whalebone for beaters rather than stone or wood. And when I discovered this, I realised what innovators my ancestors were. They practiced traditional arts, evolved from thousands of years of practice, but here they were also innovating by using new materials. And this gave me a real insight into who they were. The 2 beaters you see have different shaped and sized grooves. In a few collections worldwide, they exist like this, side by side, 2 sisters. Joy and emotion, these are the things I connect with every time I revisit these 2 sister whalebone beaters. I treat them as though they are my relatives. So now if you look behind me, and I'll just move my screen a little bit, you can see a tiputa worn like a poncho, which is part of the creative practice project I use to further understand the world that I come from. With the understanding I built from my academic research, I let that inform my creative practice of making tapa and writing. I talked earlier about the innovation of using new tools. Well, these 12 women, Vahine, our founding foremothers, and their daughters also innovated by adjusting the kinds of tapa cloth or clothing they wore on Hitiaorewere Pitcairn. So the tiputa behind me is a replica of those made by my ancestresses. Its size tells me about their height, their broad shoulders, and the patterns they created reference new ideas as well as old ones from their home islands. The intersection of academic research and creative practice hold a particular space that is difficult to describe. It's one thing to look for and write about the evidence from the past, but it's another thing to inhabit the creative space that exists without time while making something like tapa cloth that your ancestors also made. That space is a space of utter inspiration. So what relevance does this have to Indigenous joy, our survivance in a colonial world? From where I come from and from where I'm talking to you today, this joy of forging relationships with the past and present, and hopefully the future, is really important. It's about identity, because up until as recently as 30 years ago, a narrative of who Norfolk Islanders and Pitcairn Islanders are has been constructed for us. And to be honest, in many ways, we believed it. Hollywood blockbusters have been made. Some of you might be familiar with these movies that depict a part of our history, Mutiny on the Bounty. Many books have also been written with that very same title and the very same old story. And that same old story is really badly told and not factual and shows only a fragment of us. This is part of the colonial obsession about how our story began. The European British protagonists who hold all of the dialogue in the movies and in the books, and the noble savages and dusky damsels who basically populate the background. There is also the colonial oppression that amplifies a British, European, Australian bias. The colonial presence in my day-to-day life would have you and me believe that we, Norfolk Islanders, have little relationship with the Pacific, that Norfolk Islanders are simply Australians and our Pacific origins are inconsequential. Yet we live off the land and the Pacific Ocean. We live on an 8 by 5 kilometre stretch of land that is storied with our stories. Our journey across the Pacific from one periphery to another, east to west, was epic. And that was as recent as 1856. Our journey from Tahiti to Hitiaorewere Pitcairn was equally epic in 1789 to 1790. So this research and creative practice is, and always has been, an act of resistance, despite the colonial yoke that we are continually reminded of, influenced by, understood by, even within our own communities sometimes. I will always choose joy. There is a joy to resistance. There's a joy to rewiring. There is a joy to rewriting our stories. And it has been an absolute joy for me to talk with you about my joy and how that has survived through the colonial world in which we live. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you, Pauline. I always learn so much from you when you speak, and it's so true that so much of our histories have been whitewashed and overladen with stories of bravery from white men. The work you're doing is absolutely fascinating. And I can't wait to just learn much, much more. And again, thank you so much for your mentorship to Lotus. Their work too is fabulous. And I always learn so much from Lotus too. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us today. And it is an absolute joy to share this space with you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
So we'll move on to our final presenter today, who's one of my fabulous PhD candidates. Just having a little brag at their awesomeness. Joe Marama Kamera, who is an Australian Maori who was born in Aotearoa and grew up on Darawal country, where I am this morning. She's a PhD candidate and an adjunct fellow at the Department of Critical Indigenous Studies and our Centre for Global Indigenous Futures at Macquarie University. Her research area is the histories of Maori in Australia. She specialises in wahine Maori, so Maori women, their systematic annihilation in the Australian archives, and how that relates to to the present gendered roles in Te Awa Maori, the Maori world. She is the parent of two proud Wari Wari Darawal children, and Jo has done some fantastic presentations and written wonderful pieces about Maori and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander interactions over history and time. I'm so delighted that Jo has agreed to join us today to speak to her work. Thank you, Jo. Take it away.
Kia ora, Bronwyn. Thank you, everybody, for having me here today. My head's getting bigger, and I hope my hair doesn't get as big as it is in these photos, because this was clearly before I learnt the value of a good haircut and hairdressing. So, firstly, tuatahi mihi ki te tangata whenua te iwi Gadigal. Tuarua me mihi ki ngā atua, tuatoru me mihi ki ngā mate, tuawhate mihi ki ngā kanohi ora, and tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. So, as Bron said, my name's Joanne Marama Kamera. Some of you know me as Jo, some of you know me as Marama, and the meaning of my name, Marama, is actually to make things clear. And I like to think of what my name means when I'm doing my research, and I'm hoping that I make clear what and who we are here living on this country that we now call Australia. So what I want to talk to you today is about the joy of our survival through song. And I was reminded of something that Candace Kruger, who's the founder of the Yugambeh Youth Choir, said. She said when Aboriginal children sing in Aboriginal language, they gain leadership, language acquisition, and it gives them a real sense of identity. Now, when I was born, Māori culture and language was considered a redundant form of expression. And in fact, I was almost 6 years old when the native schools programs were transferred from under the native department in Aotearoa, New Zealand, to the Department of Education. And had I stayed in Aotearoa, New Zealand, I would have gone to a native school. Now, from the outset, the priority of the schools was the teaching of English, and the plan was to phase out the native schools once English had taken a hold in the community. And initially, our language was allowed to facilitate English instruction, but as time went on, official attitudes actually changed against the language, and children at the schools were not allowed to speak Māori at all. In later years, especially when my father went to school, he was punished for speaking his first language. He didn't speak English when he went to school. And in many instances, the insistence of English was generally accepted by our communities, but only those communities who were very secure in their Māoritanga, and they wanted their children to be prepared for success in the Pākehā world or the white world. Now, where I'm from in Aotearoa, it is regarded as the most remote community in the country. In fact, the native school that my father went to is still in operation on our marae, but it's used as an all-purpose room at the back. It's a tiny wee little room, and I love looking at it when I go there. Now, when Pākehā first arrived in our country, they had to learn te reo, and that was the main language. But by the early 1860s, Pākehā were in the majority and English became the dominant language. And increasingly, te reo was only confined to those Māori communities that lived separately from Pākehā. And most Pākehā didn't understand the Māori language was an essential expression of how we presented ourselves, how we identified ourselves, and how we maintained our identity as a people. and speaking Māori was officially discouraged, and many Māori themselves questioned the relevance in a Pākehā-dominated world where the most important goal seemed to be to get ahead as an individual. So our language was suppressed in schools, either informally or formally, and it ensured that our tamariki, our children, assimilated into the wider community. And yet, despite this, Te Reo Māori survived. It was the language of the marae and at home, and many of us grew up speaking a hybrid of both Pākehā and Māori. And you're probably asking, how does this relate to song? Well, without constant exposure to our language, waiata was the way our language was imparted and how we learned our stories and our culture. So these photos that you see of me here was what I did when I was a child. I didn't do sports or dancing in the Pākehā sense. I did what we call kapahaka. And this is me from the time I think I was 10 in the photo where I'm swinging the poi at the bottom. And I've continued that through. And the little fella that's up the top on the right-hand side, the tiny wee fellow who's very pale, is my 29-year-old son. So he has learnt his language through kapahaka. So our stories within Te Ao Māori, or the Māori world, are more than just narratives. They're essential parts of our identity and our culture, and they preserve our mautauranga and kaupapa Māori, our ways of knowing and being, and they transmit our whakapapa, our genealogy, our tikanga, which is our societal law and guideline for living and interacting with people, and they reinforce our cultural identity and connections to people and place. The song that I used that was important to me was called Pepeha, and it tells of the values encompassed. And the waiata that this band 660 connects themselves to is mana, aroha, and whānau. So mana is the elemental forces inside of you. Aroha, love, and whānau, our family. And it says, this is all of me. A pepeha is our way of connecting to ourselves, our people, and our place, and it tells about whakapapa. When you hear someone's pepeha, you know who they are. And an example of this was, I was at a funeral the other night, and I was sitting around the corner, and I heard one of the old men get up and start to talk. And I heard him do his pepeha, and it was my pepeha. And I knew exactly where he was from. I knew exactly what he was saying, but I knew that my obligation was to get up and sing to him, for him, because that was expected to me. So why do we sing? One of the things I hear all the time is how Māori can sing at the drop of a hat. And the first thing when I thought of Indigenous joy was I thought of our survival as through waiata and how much joy singing brings me. It connects me to my people, to my language, and to my ancestors. And there's songs for many occasions. And the ones that you most commonly hear after a speech is to enforce the quality and the intent of that speech. And it's critical as it establishes that mana of the group and the exchanges that they make. Now, I'm reminded of how a song can also show disapproval. Many years ago, when the Māori exhibition was travelling around Aotearoa, it was Christmas time, and one of the things that was supposed to happen was the person that was talking was only supposed to speak in Māori, but he broke kaupapa, and he started to speak in English, and the women that were standing behind him ready to do his waiata were very annoyed. So instead of singing a waiata at the end of his speech, they sang Jingle Bells. And all the Pākehā in the audience were going, oh, isn't that nice? They're singing a Christmas carol. Actually, they were telling him how cranky they were that he broke that protocol. So it has a quite deep meaning in relation to why we sing and what we sing about. And like all white songs, there's songs for love and death and instruction, and they're used to assist in the education of children. They urge people to take up a cause, and then they help us to remember what has gone in the past. And I'm reminded of Waiata Oriori, which was traditionally composed for a child of rank, and it's translated as a lullaby. Now, when my daughter Nyoka was born, a Waiata Oriori was composed for her from one of her uncles. And her Waiata talks about her birth and her responsibilities and how she was one of the very first Maori Kuri children born in Ngunnawal country, and how her role as she grows up was to bring the communities together. Waiata Poi, which you see me swinging here, they often document histories. The poi was symbolic of leading a journey. For example, the song Tihore Mai, who some of you know, is a children's song that we do the poi to, and it's a song about the kingfishers sheltering from rain, and it tells us and reminds us to bring us back into harmony with nature. The song A E I O U, for those of you who know it, is a song by Moana and the Moa Hunters, and it was done in the 1990s, and it was a colourful hip-hop song, but it reminded of our rangatahi, or our youth, to preserve their culture by learning te reo. The words go, it's time to kona te reo. And it also doubles as a handy guide to Maori pronunciation. I want to end up by telling you the significance of a song called Pokarikariana, which is probably the seminal Maori song. And it was sung after marriage equality was passed in the New Zealand Parliament. Now, it served the following. One was to sing a love song, but it actually had a deeper meaning. It was there to lament the fact that Tutanekai had to leave his close friend Tiki, who was his, what we call his hoa, and his takutapui hoa, so a close friend of the same sex. And Tutanekai had to leave his friend Tiki to go with a woman so they could have children. And that song was sung to remind the colonizers that what they see as a love song is actually a lament. It sounds like a love song. It's a beautiful song, but it was a lament and a reminder that takutapui, or what is known as LGBTIQA plus people, were around long before we were actually colonized. Just to finish up, I just want to say, next time you hear a Māori sing at the drop of a hat, know that that singing has meaning. It's a gift. It's the icing on the cake of someone's metaphorical speech. And that is what brings me survival and joy. So to finish up, I just want to leave you with this waiata, and it's called Ngā Iwi E, and some of you know it. What it's about is bringing everybody together like we've done on this metaphorical marae to talk about the World's International Day of Indigenous People and to celebrate our survival as Indigenous people. Ngā iwi e, karanga e te iwi e, kua e ke maine ki runga te marae e, Maria maira e marae e te motu e, menga tini roi mata, menga tini roi mata e maringi whānui e. Titiro e ngā iwi i ngā mahi o te motu, ke ora ke nei e. Rua ana te whenua, whati whati te moana. O e te aroha, o e te aroha, te mamai au e. Rua ana te whenua, whati whati hi. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Thank you, Jo.
Thank you.
And in relation to Jo's presentation about the joy of music and singing, And my mention of what brings us joy is seeing our people graduate. Just recently, we had a double graduation of 2 of our global relatives graduating with their PhD, Dr. Inez Hawa and Dr. Lou Glover. And out at the side of the hall of a very boring kind of Western graduation, very formal, we hear this beautiful voice ring out, and that was Joe. And it was absolutely joyous, as it was to see our, our colleagues and global relatives graduate with PhDs. It was a beautiful, joyful day. Thank you, Joe. So we are moving now to our Q&A.